Support for Soccer Today is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped recently launched the Ultimate Man's Hygiene Bundle, the Performance Package. Join over 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code SOCCERTODAY at manscaped.com.
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane Mullins and Kevin Laramie, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night. We're back. Welcome to Soccer Today, or welcome back to Soccer Today on Wednesday, June 6, 2022. I'm Kev Laramie, and July 6, 2022. Time goes by so quickly. And I'm joined, of course, as always, by Duane Rollins, as we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click on that subscribe button and that notification bell to be made aware whenever we upload a brand new episode live on Twitter every single day, a weekday, when it's not a holiday. We had a little bit of a holiday break with the national holiday of Canada and then of the United States. But Duane, how was your few days off?
I was pretty good. I went to Niagara, not Niagara Falls. I went to the Niagara region. I avoided the falls like the plague because
that's a good idea. Where did you go? Niagara on the Lake, St. Catharines?
Actually, though, I went to a little farmstead just outside Welland, which is kind of a forgotten part of the Niagara region. But
I love Welland. First of all, it's a little French enclave in the Niagara region.
Yeah, and you're a cyclist guy. You used to be when you had a little more time in your hands, and there's lots of good cycling routes there. The person I was with went on a few of those trips and all that. So it was a good little relaxing time away, and we're glad to be back though. So let's get at it. Talk about the train wreck that is TFC.
Well, train wreck, and also a new wagon coming to the train in a few weeks. But first of all, we'll invite you to subscribe to our podcast. If you are just joining us, thank you to listen to us on podcasts. We've been a top 100, top 50, top 10 soccer podcast, depending of the day, for the last few years. And it's because of every single one of you. But a busy week in MLS, Duane. MLS Week 18. Let's take a look at some of the scores from the weekend that was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, a 4-day weekend with games from the 2nd all the way to the 4th in Week 18. It started with Toronto, Seattle, and it finished with the Galaxy in Montreal. Similar results, I guess, in those games. I guess, well, even worse for Montreal. We'll get there in a minute. We'll all, of course, break down Toronto and Seattle and Vancouver and LAFC. Those will be our featured game today. NYCFC Atlanta, Duane. Surprising result, 2-2. Entertaining game. What did you think about a few of those results this weekend, too, that you see on your screen?
We're going to talk about TFC a lot because there's a lot to talk about in the days ahead, so I'm not going to belabor them. But I guess what I thought about is the same thing I've thought about for them for the last 2 months, is that there's not much to think about until we get into August, and we'll see about that. Well, obviously, a disappointing result for Montreal. You don't ever want to lose lopsided like that. We'll talk about it in more details about whether that means more. And we're going to talk about that Vancouver game because I don't get it. I just don't get it. But they're winning, so
they have a good record. And of course, if Scott is listening, Scott mentioned to us on Twitter that he hoped we have a conversation about, well, the streak that Vancouver is in their last 10 games. We will talk about that during our breakdown of that game. New England and Cincinnati, another 2-2 games this weekend. Columbus, Philadelphia was 0-0, so not a game that will necessarily go down in ages as a surprising game, but Philly on the road getting a point, continuing their constant point collection this year, and they are close to the top of the Eastern Conference, of course, as they have been recently. Kansas City, another loss. That's an interesting result. New York, top of the East with this win, and Kansas City struggling to score goals once again. They are the next opponent of CF Montreal. They will be traveling to Montreal for the first time in 3 years, and they play Montreal for the second time in 6. But Kansas City will be coming to Montreal after losing another game without scoring a goal. Minnesota getting a big win against Salt Lake. That was an interesting game. Nashville, Portland, another 2-2 game. It's the week of the 2-2. Well, it makes sense. 2 + 2 = 4, and it was 4th of July weekend.
There you go. Look, I want to talk about Charlotte and Austin here a little bit, but we don't talk a lot about them. Two of these teams both built similarly in my mind. Like they weren't built with flashy stars. They were built using kind of that extra allocation that you kind of get to sort of build a solid spine to get a team that you think can compete week in and week out and grind out results. And you're seeing this, particularly Austin's second season, which is obviously going much better than the first, where they kind of lacked a little bit of the depth, and they addressed that in the offseason and are moving forward with it now. It speaks to me about kind of this new phase of MLS where teams that are stronger 1 to 15 are doing better than teams that front load, which ties into our second half conversation about TFC's moves, which TFC is very much holding on to its image as we're going to be the big baddies to get the big players and move them in and be star fronted. Is that going to work moving forward? There's a question. Yeah. When you see these two expansion teams, well, one team in its second season, one team in their first expansion seasons, both above the playoff line, both solidly getting results week in, week out, that might speak to a change in how to properly build an MLS team. Something to watch.
Houston feels like it's an expansion team every single year. It feels like it's always restarting every single time. So now Jose Chicago, another loss for Chicago. Chicago back in the bottom of the Eastern Conference with a terrible points per game below 1. That's very bad. Chicago is now the worst team in the league. Orlando, DC, what a win by DC on the road. 5-3, but it was 3-0 for DC. They did a comeback just to see DC United eke them out at the end, 5-3. Mauricio Pereira might be lost for a while for Orlando. So not only did they lose on the box score, they might have lost for a few weeks their best player this year. Dallas, Miami 1-1. We'll talk about Miami in the news lately surrounding Pozuelo's potential trade to Miami later today or tomorrow. Colorado, Austin, big win for Austin once again, who is now in the conversation for the top of the West. When we break down the standings, we'll talk about it. And the LA Galaxy, Montreal, a spanking for Montreal in LA, never won at Dignity Health Sports Park. Montreal is 0-4-1 at the home that used to be called the Home Depot Center, the StubHub Center, the whatever name center, Duane, right? There's been like 20,000 names of that stadium. Montreal is 0-4-1 in Carson.
Yeah, it's just like the Seattle where the Sounders play. It's been about 15 different names too. I'm never quite sure. I miss the good old days of when, it was like the Boston Garden and like Yankee Stadium and Skydome. Like, let's go back to that.
Sure.
Grumpy old man yelling at the clouds.
I'll take the prices of gas and food from those days too.
Yeah, well, inflation.
Well, yeah, exactly. Inflation, that's why they're branded now, because things cost more. Speaking of things costing more, switching one for another, the big rumor since yesterday, and it all stems from the Italian wunderkind journalist Fabrizio Romano, who's been leaking TFC things for the last 2,000 years, apparently. But yes, Romano mentioned yesterday, and it's been the biggest kept secret, that Toronto was able or was willing to find a way to get rid of Pozuelo to free up a DP spot to bring in an Italian player, and it has probably been done. It's still not confirmed at this point, but here is what it's expected right now. The rumor is that Pozuelo is on the cusp of being traded to Miami. According to multiple reports, TFC is sending the 2020 Major League Soccer MVP to Miami for $150,000 in allocation money, liberating a DP spot that they will turn around and probably use on Bernardeschi in the next few minutes after. Here is career statistics, including the playoffs and Major League Soccer's regular season, but only in MLS. This does not include the Canadian Championship or CONCACAF Champions League or other competitions like the Leagues Cup or whatever. This is MLS focus. 4 seasons included this year, 93 games, 28 goals, 34 assists, passing accuracy of 84, that is very respectable, and a shot on target percentage of 46% throughout his MLS career. Alejandro Pozuelo is taking his talent to South Beach, according to multiple resorts.
Well, Fort Lauderdale, anyway.
Well, exactly. It ain't that sexy when you're in the middle of a field and the ocean is not in sight.
Look, for first things first, Alejandro Pozuelo was a very, very good player for Toronto FC. And I think most TFC fans, based on the reaction yesterday when this news broke, and it's done. Like, he had an Instagram story that he's since deleted from Miami. So it's done. This is happening. The reaction of TFC fans sort of spoke to how much he is regarded in this city. He had a down year last year. We all understand the personal reasons that were going on for that. I thought that he was bouncing back a little bit this year. He was very emotional, clearly, the last few games he played for TFC. I think that this was in the works for a while, that he knew this was happening, and he scored a goal. He scored a goal in that the Canadian Championships where he ran to the sidelines, pumps his fist to the crowd. It was you could tell that he knew that something was on the ends. And a lot of us thought that this move might be to LA, that there was a lot of links to Greg Vandy to go back to reunite with him. It would fit a need for LA too. I'm sure that maybe he's kind of disappointed that one didn't work out because...
Yeah. Well, there's a certain Dejan Joveljic who has stepped up recently.
Yeah, so that could have been a different, interesting fit. Miami, he's going to be part of the moving forward. This is a move that he's going to kind of, it's a sideways move in terms of the MLS player this year. I would suggest that he's going into a situation very similar to Toronto, where you have a team that's almost rebuilding from complete scratch, right? Toronto has a little bit more money coming in. Obviously, they're going in this Italian different direction. We've talked a lot about that. We'll talk a bit about it more. But in terms of Pozuelo's play for TFC, he's, to me, the second best player to ever play for this team. And the first, I think we don't need to tell you who that is. That would be a little Italian fella.
I thought it was I don't know. I was gonna say
Adam Braz.
Cal Becker. I was gonna say Cal Becker.
Yeah, well, that's sure. To be serious though, it's Javinko is who I'm talking to if you're not aware. But look, he was always going to be in Javinko's shadow too. Like he came in after that. Javinko had left in the offseason. There was the whole rigmarole to get him here, to bring him over early. He came in and he immediately stepped up. I'll never forget being in the stands for that first game. He scored 2 outrageous goals. That chip from inside the box in the first game against NYCFC. He tormented NYCFC throughout his career with TFC. Scored, of course, the Panenka penalty to put them through to the final, basically, in 2019. When we look hindsight quickly, I'll let you back in after this. When we look in hindsight back to Toronto TFC in 2019, TFC in 2020, I call them the echo seasons because they weren't perfect throughout them, but they had enough old quality and Pozuelo coming in to bring new quality that it managed to sort of hide a lot of gaps that we're seeing now. Particularly 2019, the run to the final. Pozuelo was a big part of that. The echo years from the championship teams was a big part of that. It hid the mistakes that were being made that we're seeing play out now. I said today on Twitter there are only 2 players remaining that you can directly relate to Ali Curtis. That manager's only been gone for a couple of years. To have only 2 players left that are directly from him, that's damning.
Well, that was going to be my next point. Is let's not forget that Pozuelo was Ali Curtis's big move as a general manager, replacing Tim Bezbatchenko. He was his DP that didn't work out at the beginning. He wanted him, and it took forever for him to get that done with the Belgium club Genk at that moment. So, and it was like almost a drama, and he finally got this deal through the finish line. But yeah, he's the last remnants of that part, I guess, of the history of Toronto FC. But the big reason why Toronto FC want to unload or offload Pozuelo is to free up a DP spot, because another opportunity comes calling for an Italian player in Toronto. Here is what is rumored at this moment, according to Fabrizio Romano, once again in multiple sources. Federico Bernardeschi to join Toronto FC. The Italian player could be set to join the Reds on a free transfer. He is without a club since July 1st, not being part of Juventus' plan as they rebuild, even getting Paulo Dybala off their books. Juventus being one of the biggest, affected by not necessarily the pandemic, but also inflation. So it's a tough time for the old lady in Turin. But this means Bernardeschi is coming to Toronto, probably. 5 seasons with Juve, 183 games, 12 goals, 17 assists, but that's not his main his main task. He will be more of a creative midfielder, but those statistics will be duplicated, at least in MLS, being a bit of a different type of play, and you have a bit more ways to express yourself offensively for this type of player. I'm expecting big things from him, and he is one of the friends, part of the travel, the entourage, or the luggage of Insigne coming to Toronto, Duane.
This one is, I think this one has the potential to be even bigger than Insigne because he's 3 years younger. And that's a considerable mark. He's coming at a similar age that Sebastian Giovinco did, from the same club. And perhaps had a little bit better stats than from that club than Giovinco had at the time. So, I mean, I'm not going to say this guy's going to step in and do the same offensive things that Giovinco did. Giovinco became such a great goal scorer for TFC, was able to score off of particularly those set pieces. I don't know if we quite have the same profile here. Insigne will probably be taking those anyway. But yeah, look, this is clearly a direction that they're having here. This is clearly a lot of money that's going to go into this. This is a guy that's been linked to several clubs in Serie A as well heading into this. Now that he's so strongly linked to TFC suggests to me that they are putting significant money on the table to convert him over here at his age, where he could have still stayed in the mix to potentially play for a Europa League team, if not necessarily even a championship or Champions League type level team. So this is a big gap.
Well, it's also motivated by the fact that the Italian players will not have a World Cup to get ready for, or it doesn't matter if they don't shine internationally or get really picked for their team internationally in the next few years. So it gives them a little window to monetize their name in a city that will recognize them as stars. You should have seen the crowd last week when Insigne landed in Toronto.
Yeah, but there was a parade. They literally had a parade around the corner from me.
And you know what I didn't get, though? And we don't have image for this, but why was he wearing a Celine shirt? And was it the Celine I'm thinking about? Was it a Celine Dion hoodie? And first of all, I didn't know she made hoodies. And second of all, I think when he just looked at Canada, he's like, oh yeah, I'll put Celine Dion. And Montreal fans are like, sure, she's ours.
Sure. Sure. Drake, you're in Drake country now. Drake, and it's interesting.
Exactly, that's what he needed. You should have had a shirt that says Drake, or not. You know, he's a very polarizing figure, Drake.
Yeah, well, just at the day that Insigne was announced, shocking of shocks, OBO announced the line that was tied into TFC. So there you go. Good for Drake. Monetizing when you can.
Sure, exactly.
Way to go, Aubrey. Way to go.
Yeah, exactly. Look, Aubrey from Degrassi, the new generation. Well, the second generation. I guess there's probably a third or fourth by now.
I think there's a new one. I was never really a Degrassi guy. I know where Degrassi Street is in Toronto. If anyone ever comes and wants to know, I can show you there. Anyway.
So I remember the first iteration of Degrassi, Duane, and I was watching this, and I don't remember everything, but at some point, one kid was walking home from school, okay? And he tripped into somewhere where they had like construction, and he had a really bad sprain, and then it was like a traumatic event. And I remember as a kid watching this and really being careful walking on the sidewalks after.
Well, there you go. Fair enough. I remember the OG. I'm not going to go any further than that because that's going to age me too much to get into OG of Degrassi. But nonetheless, you can get it on, I think, on TVO here in Ontario, which is our free educational network. Anyhow, look, Insigne is coming. The Italian Renaissance is coming here to Toronto.
Wait! Breaking news, Duane. Yeah. We're telling me, according to multiple sources on Twitter, Insigne left training. He left the training today. Some soreness in his calf. Breaking news, according to Bob Bradley. Until July 23rd, it's not necessarily a good look for him to play. Maybe in a few weeks he'll be ready, but right now, a calf soreness already for Insigne.
Well, this was always going to be the case. I mean, look, they normally wouldn't be playing until the first week of August, coming off their normal postseason, right? So the fact that they're trying to crank him up now, look, this team is going nowhere. I suspect that the first game he plays is going to be in the Cup final against the Whitecaps because that's the only game that's going to matter for the rest of TFC season. So you might see him in that one. That's kind of where we're at. Like, I mean, yeah, obviously, look, I don't want to be too dismissive. Who knows? These guys could come in. and they could rip the league apart immediately, and they could go on a great run and be set up to go in the playoffs. That could happen, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well,
I think what's more likely
next year, exactly. Next year
they're going to set themselves up for next year, so they're going to be real careful with Insigne. Exactly. They're not going to rush him in.
No, they're not going to rush him in just in case. They don't want nothing to be a lengthy injury. All right, now it's time to talk about our sponsor, Manscaped. Manscaped, the worldwide leader in men's grooming products. First of all, a really good addition to my grooming routine over the last month. It comes with the Shed Travel Bag, and I'm talking about the Performance Package 4.0 that you can get on manscaped.com, and you get 20% off with the code SOCCER today when you use it at checkout. The Performance Package 4.0 comes with the anti-chafing boxers, which are great to play soccer. They're great to train at the gym. They are an effective product to literally take out some irritant, from my daily routine. Also, the Lawnmower 4.0 that has a protective technology made of ceramic here that is really beneficial for your personal areas. No nick and tuck when you use this. If it's dark in the shower, there's even a light on this beautifully crafted it's a razor, or a clipper more appropriately. It comes with a crop reviver and the ball deodorant and the Weed Whacker 4.0 that is very useful for your ears and your nose. As my grandfather used to say, your ears when you grow old, they don't just fall off your head, they go back in and they come out from the ears and the nose. And with the Weed Whacker 4.0, you can deal with that effect of father time. And of course, you get 20% off when you go to manscaped.com and use the code SOCCER today at checkout. That's 20% off at manscaped.com with the code SOCCER today. We'll be right back after this short break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back on Soccer Today, the time of the show to thank one of the greatest human beings on earth. And I'm talking about the patrons that support us financially through our Patreon page at the Shoutout tier and above. Here are our great patrons, from Pierre Mayotte all the way to Blue Collar Dan, Sean, Daniel, Dennis, Glad, Gonzalo. I am all glad every one of you is here. Martin, Jordan, Ian, thank you for supporting this show and making this show one of the beautiful parts of my day every single week. And of course, you can join that crowd and support us financially by going to our Patreon page at patreon.com/2solitudes, and you get all the details in becoming part of the Shoutout and the Super Shoutout tier. And the next show should be out in the next few days, tentatively recorded on Thursday. We'll talk about the W Championship, CONCACAF W Championship, Canada 6-0 over the last couple days against Trinidad and Tobago. It was a great victory for Canada in the group stage right now of the W Championship, which is CONCACAF's premier women soccer championship.
Yeah, and it'll qualify to the World Cup and to the Olympics. More importantly, Canada needs to win that to qualify outright to the Olympics. They'll have a second chance to go in if they finish second in that tournament. So we'll give that far more coverage, the coverage it deserves. Maybe a nod to the Euros as well, and tomorrow's show.
Yeah, because it's the Women's Euro this summer in just a few weeks, and it'll be a great time. I'm really looking forward to looking at Spain with Alexia Putellas, one of the best players in the world, and I think Spain is one of the favorites. Spain, France, and no, Canada or the United States cannot win the Euro. It's the Euro, okay? Thank you. Now moving on. Yeah. Let's talk about TFC's big defeat at home. You mentioned this team is going nowhere. It's true. Let's look. A big loss at home at BMO Field, but expected goals would tell you that the same, but a makeshift Seattle roster came to Toronto and won. A roster filled with young players in a busy time of the schedule for the Sounders, and Dylan Teves is, I guess, the spokesperson of the young talented Sounders that gave Toronto another defeat. 2-0 for the Sounders at BMO Field, a place that Seattle knows how to win at, just like in 2016 when they lifted the Philip F. Anschutz Trophy at that stadium. Duane is talking, but he's muted, so I don't know what he's saying, and it's going to stay this way. 13 shots, 6 on target for TFC, 62% possession for the Reds in the defeat, 38 for Seattle. Interesting aspect here is in the interception statistic, Duane. Big advantage for Seattle, 27 interception versus 12. The breaking of the run of play by Seattle is how they get it done.
Yes. First off, they drew the game in 2016. That's what I said. They did not win that game. They drew the game and they won the penalty shootout, which is a different part of the competition.
They raised the trophy. They raised the trophy, though. That was factual. After
the draw. 27 interceptions. Yes, I'm glad you pointed that out, and I was guessing that's why you had included on the graphic, because you don't usually have interceptions on there. That speaks to Seattle's style, as you say. They're stepping up, they're winning the ball in dangerous positions, and they're getting opportunities. So Toronto is doing a lot with the ball. They're getting a lot of opportunities here. They're even creating some good opportunities. The 1.5 XG is not bad, but Seattle is able to convert more with more direct play, and that's how they play. That is the Sounders' way. I've talked about this a couple times in the last little while. They are one of the few teams in MLS that has an identity that you can see year after year. Player after player can come in and out of that team, and they seem to play the same way all the time. Two different coaches, obviously the late Siggy Schmidt led into Schmelzer now, and here we are. But look, we saw LAFC lose this week. Seattle's just hanging around there, starting to play their way up that schedule. We knew they would. They are the champions of the continent right now. We don't know whether they're going to have an opportunity to represent MLS in the Club World Cup. We don't know what's happening with that yet, but certainly it is a team that has generated a lot, has created a lot, and continues to be very, very good. In terms of Toronto, we said a lot in the last segment.
Exactly. So it's a hold-up pattern, right? They're going to hold until the next good thing for Toronto, which will be coming a little later, which we can tease if we want. The Canadian Championship Final will be in 20 days on July 26th, live at BC Place. That's the next important game for Toronto, and maybe that's when the Italian contingent will fully debut for TFC. Let's move on to the other game that took place late last Saturday. It is Vancouver who was hosting LAFC, and Vancouver, a win, a last-minute win, last grasp, last gasp, last chance. Adrian Kubas, at the 89th minute, got the game winner. Is that replicable? Who knows? But a 6-2-2 record in the last 10 games for Vancouver. 6 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws for Vanni Sartini and the Whitecaps. Just like at the end of last season, expected goals do not follow their amount of goals. And of course, they have weird situations, weird part of games, and they get calls going their way late in games to get either the game winner, the result. It is weird things, but it is true though that they are a contender for the playoffs with this 6-2-2 record over their last 10 games. Again, surprising results coming from the Whitecaps.
If you hold a great offensive team like LAFC to a 0.4 XG, that is replicable. We always bash Vancouver. And the reason I knock Vancouver, bash is a strong way to put it. The reason I criticize Vancouver is because they don't score enough. They don't create enough offense. And as I've said many times on this show, offense wins titles in MLS. You need to score. If you don't score, you're not going to be a championship team. This is backed up by numbers that can go back years. You can check them yourself if you want. I've run through them before. Yeah. Teams that score higher win. It's very rare. It's only happened once at Kansas City in 2000. It's the only time that a team that had that didn't have a top, I believe, 5 offensive record in the league won MLS Cup. So it's very, very, very rare. However, being solid defensively can get you a playoff spot. That is absolutely true, and that is what's happening here. They're playing they're grinding to get results. Once the business end of the season rolls around, they'll probably get shut down by a better team. That'll probably happen until they add a high-end offensive talent and can continue to score. But that team has not been very good for a long time. So if they can make the playoffs the second year in a row, that's something they can build on. Perhaps that can attract better players. Perhaps they can start to address the other issues. So I'm not being critical of what he's doing now to get this team where they need to be, because this is as good as this team can be. This is their ceiling, and they're playing up to it, and congratulations to them for doing so.
With the Cavallini and White duo up top, they seem to be a better result, but the amount of goals scored, I don't think follows that. It is still a work in progress for Vancouver as we look at their best 11 going forward, but so far 6-2-2 record over the last 10 games, and they're climbing in the Western Conference standing. Let's have a look at the standings in the Western Conference as we continue our look at the Canadian team results and breakdown of Montreal defeat in a minute. Here is Vancouver's position. They are 9th right now, 24 points, just 2 away from Seattle at the 7th spot. LAFC is dominating the league and the Western Conference with 36 points. Austin is 2nd with 34. Salt Lake 3rd with 29 points. Surprising Salt Lake still, the diminished Salt Lake that have been playing without their best player, Damir Kreilach, and Albert Rasnack, who decided to play for Seattle this year, still find a way to be a top 3 team in the Western Conference mid-season. LA Galaxy is 4th. Dallas, Nashville, and Seattle are your top 17 in the Western Conference. What is your deception looking at this, Duane? Colorado, who's rumored to maybe being in talks with Toronto to trade Marc-Anthony Kaye to Toronto, shopping ain't over in Toronto.
Yeah, well, if MAK comes to reunite with Bob Bradley, we're going to have a long conversation about that day, and I may be juggling and drinking shots of something if that happens, because he's exactly the player they need to fix a lot of their problems and to maybe give a rest to a loyal servant of the team that maybe needs to readdress exactly what his role is.
Michael Bradley as a substitute and not a
or even as an 8 more than a 6 kind of role. That was something. Sure. He's still a great passer of the ball. You watch Michael Bradley game in game, he's still a great passer of the ball. No, Colorado is playing terrible, and they were expected to do much more there. You mentioned SLC. This is, again, the theme that is coming to this season. I'm going to call it the tortoise and the hare effect. I'm just making this up off the top of my head. The tortoises are winning the race in MLS. It's not the teams that are running out with those spectacular fun teams. It's those teams that just kind of shuffle ahead. SLC is getting results. I think it has something to do with the fact that our transfer markets, this is the first real transfer market coming to MLS since the pandemic started. That has meant that teams that were able to get solid domestic, solid players across the board have been successful. SLC had to do that because they weren't owned by anyone for a year, owned by the league. They had to operate with no expenditure beyond the budget, the salary cap. So that put them in a different situation. It forced them to build the roster that way. But that kind of roster is succeeding in MLS right now. Philadelphia, NYCFC are the top end of that. I'd say Salt Lake City is the bottom end of that, but you look at the results and who's to say bottom top right now, they're getting it done. So I think this is going to change for next year because there's going to be 2 windows, the one that's happening plus the one in the winter, and one coming off a World Cup too. So I think that's going to blow everything's open, and those big spending teams might win it out at that point. And that said, a big good spending team might win it out this year too. LAFC is.
Well, exactly.
Nonetheless,
but once
but there's a window there.
Exactly. Yeah, once they're playing good, their supporter shield leader right now, and then they're going to add Bale and Chiellini. In Bale, I'm not convinced, but Chiellini is going to help with the attitude, and of course, it's going to help with reassuring your backline and giving you a bit more depth. All right. I've waited long enough. Let's talk about Montreal's big defeat in LA. The worst defeat of the season for the CF Montreal. A 4-0 defeat in LA. Hollywood wasn't really in a mood to cast the Montrealers on July 4th. It's a big win, a big firework win that was actually filled with fireworks after the game at Dignity Health Sports Park. It was quite the visual in LA. Chicharito scored his first goal in 11 games. That took a long time for him to score his 7th of the season, and it was 11 games before that. That was his last goal. So he opened the scoring at the 8th minute, followed by Dejan Joveljic, maybe the hottest player in MLS right now. Over his last 3 games in MLS before this, he had scored 4 goals with 2 assists, all as a substitute. Greg Vanney was able to find him a spot in the starting 11, taking the right attacking midfield spot of a 4-2-3-1 for Dejan Joveljic, and him and Chicharito were able to find a chemistry, not having played together in this formation over the last few months. And Chicharito and Joveljic could be a maybe underrated attacking duo in the league, and Ryan Raveloson scored twice to make it 4-0. Of course, there was a penalty here on Joel Waterman, who was a bit harsh, but hey, it counts. Expected goals 3-1 for LA, 1.1 for Montreal. Clearances, Duane, I want to bring your attention to this. A good defensive performance also by LAFC. Montreal did show some fight at some point, but LAFC were able to shut them down and clear the box 26 times compared to 8 for Montreal. Quite a performance by Greg Vanney, and LA needed this to continue to be a playoff team in the Western Conference. Montreal does not suffer too much from a loss out of their conference. No contender made points on their back, but Montreal is still third. They had an opportunity to take the top spot at the East once again. They are now third with this result, Duane.
You sometimes give your French phrase of the day. Do you have a French phrase for like "got your ass kicked"? Because that would be
yeah. You could just literally translate this to getting your mange une volée. I guess mange une volée will be your French expression because which means mange une volée. You got your ass kicked.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what's happening here, and LA. I think was able to take advantage of the fact that Montreal didn't have its central presence that they might normally have in terms of creating, and they were able to sit back a little bit and play that game that they wanted to play. Look, sometimes these games happen, particularly on a West Coast swing. That's not something that's very easy in MLS. You look at the record of teams that go cross-country. It's terrible. If the flights matter still in this league, they have changed a lot of that, so it should get better in the days ahead, but it's still kind of in that weird world where if you're flying across the country, you're going to have trouble to get up to those games, and sometimes you just take your foot off the gas when it's not happening too. And
for Montreal, it was the 5th game in 16 days when you include the Canadian Championship, and it was the second of a 2-game trip to LA. The coach, and if you look at why Cuisera was starting as your left midfielder, the coach, Wilfred Nancy, in his post-game comments, mentioned that he felt his team to be a bit tired and needed to change a few of the starting 11. We had Kyoto, but Toy didn't start this one. There was a few changes and a few decisions taken by Wilfred Nancy that maybe he was happy with the win against Seattle. And he takes the 3 points there, and 3 points out of 2 games in LA and Seattle. He takes it, and he moves to the next game against Kansas City at home, where Montreal will be a heavy favorite, playing their favorite lineup now, maybe a 3-5-2 with up top Mason Toy, Romel Kyoto, and Miljevic, who's turning out to be maybe your best option as a 10 type of role in a 3-5-2 formation heading into the next one. But this was a 3-4-3 to start, with Cuisera as your left attacking midfielder. Ismael Kone, Kyoto, and Joaquin Torres were your strikers there. Did not generate a whole lot. 1.1 expected goal when you add everybody, and there's also some of those 1.1 that comes from defenders in the box on set pieces. This was not a good game from Montreal. This is not Montreal's A lineup. Lapalainen on the right instead of the left. A lot of things were confusing to a lot of us with this choice of lineup, but I guess once again, if you get a victory against Kansas City Saturday, you get 2 wins out of your last 3 games, and everything is still dandy if you get the one against Kansas City.
Look, MLS is a league where it's still hard for people to wrap their head around this if you're used to following European leagues or if you're new to coming into MLS. Unless you are one of the top 1% of MLS teams of all time, you do not go into every week thinking you're going to get points. It just doesn't happen very often. It is a very special team in MLS that is able to do that. You punt on games. The best teams in MLS history have punted on games all the time. I don't think punt is a strong way to put it because that implies you're not trying. Obviously, the players out there are trying, but you make decisions that reflect the reality of what your depth is. I've said before, Montreal's weakness is they're decent 1-11, but they maybe have some work to do from 12 to 24. If they're going to be a championship level team, I don't think Montreal's a championship level team. We can argue that if you want, but right now in the East, you have a lot of teams just floundering around. They have made choices this week that are going to set them up to perhaps maintain that home playoff date, which would be a very big, significant accomplishment for Montreal this year. They haven't had one since when?
Exactly.
The Toronto series?
No, I think so. Well, off the top of my head, I don't remember, so I'm not gonna risk it.
Yeah.
But when we're looking at example, how Montreal is perceived too, MLSsoccer.com in their power rankings mid-season award as of now, they mention as contender for right now the coach of the year as Wilfried Nancy, and their MVP contender right now is Georgi Mihailovic. Of course, his injury is not going to help right now, and he might not be the MVP contender because of his injury. We'll see how long he's off the pitches. But here's the standings in the Eastern Conference. New York, top of the East. They've played one more game than all their contenders. NYCFC has played 2 games less, so points per game, NYCFC could still be the best in the East as of now. That's the question. We still don't know who the best team is in the Eastern Conference, but right now it's New York with 32 points, followed by Philly with 30, Montreal 29, NYCFC 29 also. Cincinnati, surprising, still in a playoff contention mid-season. Usually they're always winning the spoon, the wooden spoon race. Right now, Duane, there's still a playoff spot. That's surprising. Also, Orlando, New England. New England has straightened out their season after struggling off the bat, back being a playoff position. Charlotte just off the playoff, but still in contention. Miami, with maybe Pozuelo over the next few games, could be a danger for a playoff spot. Then you have the deceptions, you have the disappointments of Columbus, Atlanta, Toronto, and DC and Chicago, the last 6 club in the Eastern Conference.
Well, I would argue that anyone who thought TFC wasn't going to be about here right now was not really paying attention to what TFC was going to be until they brought in the reinforcements. But that's a topic we've talked about a million times. Atlanta's obviously had an incredibly disappointing season in terms of the injuries. That's an unfortunate situation for them, but it's a situation that's happened a couple years now, something they should probably keep an eye on. You mentioned the fire earlier on. Oh my God! I don't. At some point, something's got to give there.
Yeah, I don't know. Like Ezra, what about the coach? Is it the coach's fault? I don't know what's happening. Shaqiri has decent stats when you look at the advanced metrics, but as a whole, Kasper Shabilko, maybe we get why Philadelphia was like, sure, you want him? we'll find a way to send it to you. Oh yeah, there's a couple of question marks still in Chicago.
Look, and there's going to be a lot of maneuvering. I mean, I think when you look at Atlanta, they're probably looking at next year. We mentioned Toronto a lot. They're looking at next year. There's going to be teams trying to set themselves up. As I said, for the third time, I'll say it. This is a season that outside of LAFC and probably Seattle, which is always there, if you're a lesser team, if you're not lesser, but if you're a team that doesn't typically contend, this might be your opportunity to take a run, because I don't see anyone really grabbing things, particularly in the East. Although I do think NYFC, with those 2 games in hand, once they make those up, might start to look more like we'd expect.
No, I agree, and it'll be a great topic to see what the standings will look like. That's the beauty of doing graphics. I have standings and I have dates on them, so I'll know in 6 weeks the difference between now and 6 weeks ago from now, and we can maybe judge the difference. But that's the show for today. We hope you enjoyed today's show. If you are just finding us live, you can of course subscribe to our show everywhere you find your favorite podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spreaker, amongst other places. Thank you for subscribing to our YouTube channel. That really helps us and help the algorithm. Click on the like button also and the notification bell to be made aware of whenever we upload a brand new podcast. In probably a bit more than 48 hours, we have the Two Solitudes Soccer Podcast on our Patreon page that will be put online, available at patreon.com/2Solitudes. And of course, you can get 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code SOCCERTODAY at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping worldwide with the code SOCCERTODAY at manscaped.com. Unlock your confidence and always have the right tool for the job with Manscaped. Until next time, as always, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.